Our first panelist is Fatma Benli Yalçın. She's a Turkish lawyer and ombudsperson. The Ombudsman Institute, she's part of, among other initiatives, have been reporting on human rights violations in Gaza. Here you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, dear participants. Maybe you remember that in 2020, Australia shot and killed 5,000 camels from helicopters, saying that lack of water the reason. And people from across the world mobilized and to save as many as they could. And I am sure if we talk about the 2.3 million camels or cats, the world would have done whatever it took to prevent 100,000 bombs from being dropped on them, to stop them from being burned alive in tents and buried under rubble, or dying in pain from organ failure caused by starvation. However, when it comes to Israel, unfortunately, for the past 20 months, the world has failed to prevent the 38,000 children losing their mom or dad or both. The same international committee has failed to stop 900,000 children from facing starvation, while thousands of aid trucks have been waiting off the border. As you know, famine caused children go blind first. Even if a miracle happens and they survive today, months without food and clean water and medicine mean they will not have healthy lives, even in the lands to which they are forcibly displaced. We are living in a period in which international convention and the rules of humanitarian law that should be applied in conflicts are completely disregarded. Countries are ignoring their duty to prevent the genocide and supporting war crimes by still providing weapons to Israel. Beyond children, Israel killed 1,000 babies under the age of 1. Despite these media outlets and statements, still continue to label the situation a war or conflict. It is not a war, not a conflict at all. Actually, from the very first day, it has been an act of mass destruction with the clear goal of the occupation and annexation. As it known on May 5th, Israel approved the plan to expand the attacks on Gaza. According to this plan, more of Gaza will be occupied. The buffer zone, which already takes more than 30% of Gaza, will widen. Israel force will not leave the occupied areas. Netanyahu openly said that now we will change the face of the Middle East. But this is not the point that was reached gradually over the past 20 months. Because of Netanyahu said, October 7th actually, I say to the residents Gazan, leave now because we will operate forcefully everywhere. We will reduce everything into rubble. Actually, that has already happened for entire Gaza. The same day, Nissim Vaturi, who is Deputy Speaker of the Knesset and member of Likud Party, wrote on social media, we are now united to one goal, to wipe the Gaza Strip off the face of the earth. They did what they said actually. Gaza is now a humanitarian disaster zone where nothing is left for survival. As the Ombudsman Institution of Turkey, which is the constitutional body, we have been documenting the genocide in Gaza for over 17 months. Copies of our work are available here. You can also find them on our website, www.ombudsman.gov.tr. Just 5 months after October 7th, we published our special reports, Gaza from the world's largest open-air prison to the world's largest children's cemetery, which clearly states that Israel has been committing genocide. In February 2024, we sent our report to ICC and ICJ and stating that unless the world stops in, the main goal is full occupation of Gaza. Since then, we have published 7 thematic reports to starvation in Gaza, prohibited weapons in Gaza, the longest occupation of the century, also being a child, being a woman, being a health worker in Gaza. And as understood by the reports, the reality has been clear from the very first day. As you know, on September 22nd, 2023, 2 weeks before October 7th, Netanyahu spoke at the UN General Assembly and mentioned a new Middle East. And the map he displayed showed the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and even the East Jerusalem marked as Israeli lands. Actually, since day one, Israel has worked to take that map a reality. Just 2 days after the attacks, Israel began using starvation as a weapon of war to force 2.3 million people from their homelands. On October 9th, 2023, Israel Defense Minister Gallant said on TV, we are imposing a food siege of Gaza, no electricity, no food, everything is closed, we are fighting human animals, and we will act accordingly. Israel has targeted the entire civilian population from the beginning. On October 12, 2023, Israeli President Herzog openly said that it is the entire nation out there that is responsible. That is why 69% of those killed are women and children, unlike in any other war before. In the first week, Israel bombed water sources and began destroying the agriculture and livestock facilities. It left Gazan people completely dependent on external humanitarian aid to survive. 93% of the aid was blocked by January 2025. After it was announced that Gaza could become the Riviera of the Middle East, as March 2nd, Israel completely stopped the aid, Just 6 days after the October 7th, Israel issued evacuation orders for 1.1 million people in the north to move to the south, to the Egyptian border, seeking to wipe out all of Palestinian existence from the very beginning. Israel has destroyed not only houses, but also archaeological sites and even cemeteries. They even bombed the 5th century church, which is the third oldest church in the world. Israel has ignored international court from the beginning. Just after the ICJ's decision on January 29, 2024, just 4 months after October 7th, the Return to Gaza conference was held. 40 ministers and many MPs attended. The ministers start a map of the settlements that will be on Gaza, built in Gaza. Minister Ben-Gvir said, we need to encourage the immigration of Gaza, while the Minister of Finance stated that soldiers fighting in Gaza would be favored for settlement. Therefore, unfortunately, it's not surprising that 1.5 years later, they announced the occupation of Gaza. They state that the entire population of Gaza has has no alternative but to leave, and confirmed talks with other countries about the possibility of accepting large numbers of Gazans. Israel is openly destroying and stealing their lives and also their homeland of 2.3 million people with bombs and systematically man-made famine. From the very beginning, Israel has been describing Palestinians as inhuman, unhuman, animalistic people, even described them as the Amalek people who must be destroyed without mercy, including infants and also breastfeeding mothers. On August 8, 2024, Minister of Finance of Israel, Smotrich, openly said blocking humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip is justified and moral, even if cause 2 million civilians to be die of hunger. I want a Jewish state that includes Jordan, Lebanon, and parts from Egypt, Syria, Iraq, and also Saudi Arabia. On May 6, 2025, Minister of Heritage of Israel, Eliyahu, said, didn't hesitate to say on TV, they need to starve. If there are civilians who fear for their lives, they should obey the immigration plan, which they have been following. This immigration plan, Gallant explained on the second day of the attacks in 2023. In the past, videos showed, children from the 6 to 10 suffering and dying in Gaza. But today, we see infants only a few months all suffering covered in blood. In April 2025, they imputed the arm of Imad's 2-month-old baby without anesthesia, and I don't know what further horror is waiting for them. The world has not stopped Israel from killing 20,000 children, most of them under the rubble. Whatever happens today, the free world must not allow the Gazans to be expelled from their homelands. If the satellite city is built on top of the bodies of children and on the world's largest children's cemetery in Gaza, the annexation will not be end there. Israeli Minister Smotrich already can openly declare that 2025 will be annexation year of the West Bank. You know, there are 6.4 million Palestinian refugees worldwide because of Israel. It is only a matter of time before another 2.3 million people from Gaza and 3.3 million people from West Bank join them. When that happens, believing that Al-Aqsa Mosque will remain untouched is just be a dream. Israel believes they will always have impunity and they feel free to speak of stealing their homelands, the others' lands, because they have never been held accountable for the measures they committed over the past 75 years. Even if that is virtual court for now, it is important to document these crimes and make them pay for it eventually. For this reason, I thank you for all for being here today and for all your efforts. As you know, they plan and Allah plans, and Allah is the best of planners. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Now we come to Mazin Kamsia. Is he there?
Can you hear me? Everybody can hear me, I suppose? Okay. Can I proceed? You can hear me? Hello? Can you all hear me, or shall I? Okay. All right. I mean, I can send you documents and articles and so forth about the subject I will speak about for 10 minutes. So I'm going to be very brief in describing. We have a genocide, of course, going on, but we also have an ecocide, a scholasticide, a medicide. Scholasticide, for example, destruction of the universities in Gaza, destruction of the schools, the educational system, etc. I won't talk about that. There's an ecocide, which is destruction of the environment and the infrastructure for the people and for nature, and not just in the Gaza Strip, but also throughout Palestine, from the Galilee north to the Negev south. There has been a damage to our environment in the past 8 decades of colonization. I'll mention a few examples, again, because of lack of time, but I can send you, we have even a database on environmental injustice issues. Example number 1, drainage of the wetlands in the Hula area in the north that devastated the lives and livelihood of the people in the Hula, and actually they were expelled. 11 Palestinian villages and communities were expelled, but this also damaged the environment, because when you drain the wetlands, the migrating birds have no place to settle down, so it impacted biodiversity in the area. 219 species disappeared from the area, and the wetlands are gone. The second example, diversion of the water of the Jordan River Basin from Lake Tiberias to the west. The Jordan River used to flow at 1,350 million cubic meters per year. Now it flows at 20 million cubic meters per year, which is barely a stream, and it's polluted to death. Again, had devastating impact on the lives and livelihood of the indigenous people around the Jordan River Basin, whether Jordanians or Palestinians or in the upper reach Syrians in the Golan Heights area. That devastation also is damaging not just to people, but also to the biodiversity of the Jordan River Basin, to agriculture, to everything else in the Jordan River Basin. That's example 2. Example 3, after Israel was created, they ethnically cleansed about 540 Palestinian communities, villages, towns, Bedouin communities, etc. And when they did that, they destroyed the landscape around these villages and towns. That includes destroying domestic trees and wild trees, bulldozing them basically. Domestic trees like figs and almonds and olives, of course, and wild trees like carobs and oaks and hawthorn and so on. Millions of trees were uprooted, and in place of those depopulated Palestinian villages and their trees and their plants, Israel planted pine trees, European pine trees, Pinus halepensis, and this was devastating for the biodiversity of the area and for the peoples that were their lives and livelihood. This is example 3. I could list you another 100 examples over the past 77 years or so, but I want to list some examples from Gaza, so I'll jump onto the situation in Gaza. And in Gaza, we did some research. We have data now. For example, we did a publication in the Journal of Remote Sensing where we used 0.5 meters and 3 meter resolution satellite images to look at the destruction of tree cover in Gaza and the destruction of greenhouses in Gaza. And the destruction is devastating. In some parts of Gaza, it was 94%, like in the Gaza city governorate. 94% of tree cover was destroyed. In other areas like South Gaza and Rafah, it was less. But that was until the period of the study, which was 1 year from October 2023 to September 2024. 1 year of destruction. Since then, of course, there has been more destruction. So essentially, we now estimate that on average, 95% of tree cover in Gaza is gone. And the same for greenhouses. By the time we did the actual initial study, in 1 year, most of the greenhouses in the northern half of the Gaza Strip were gone. In the North Gaza district itself, only three greenhouses were left, and those have since been demolished. So we see this damage that's devastating from this study and from subsequent studies. We did another study on the natural plant cover and the habitats of species, including endangered species listed on the IUCN Red List. And those species have been devastated also, according to our imaging and data analysis of their habitats and so on. FAO did Food and Agriculture Organization of the United States or United Nations did some study on agricultural fields, found similar that 82 to 85% of agricultural fields were damaged. This damage, the cost of this damage is incalculable. Well, I mean, you can estimate and you can do some calculations, but this requires a lot of research, time and effort, and estimates of reconstitution. And it's difficult at this point to judge cost for restitution. For example, we don't know the level of the residual white phosphorus and depleted uranium and heavy metals that are in the soils that would employ it. I will end by saying the ecocide is actually could be more devastating long-term for human health and human livelihood in Gaza. For example, the risk for cancers from the residues of the bombs that are left from the smoke, from the debris. All of this requires a lot of research. There is already some research, including ours and others. There's probably a few hundred papers just on the Gaza ecocide damage that are out there in the literature. But this research needs to be compiled and needs to be documented and summarized in legal briefings and so on. But we clearly know that the damage is horrendous. The damage to the water aquifer in Gaza, for example, it would be very difficult now to think whether the water aquifer will be possible to replenish or not, because Israel flooded the tunnels that the resistance movement has built. They flooded them with seawater. And so seawater in the tunnels with the soil structure, substrata structure goes into the aquifer. The aquifer has become unusable now, but would it be possible to replenish it in 20, 30, 50 years? The answer to that is unknown and requires some additional research beyond what we have done. I will stop here, and I'm happy to give you more information if you email me or whatever, but there's a lot of data that is to be summed up, and the data is overwhelming. The damage is probably my own estimate of just the last year and a half in Gaza. The estimated damage is at least $500 billion.
Thank you, Mazin. Thanks a lot. Okay. I was just about to introduce him, but he started his talk before I introduced him, so let me do my job properly. Maybe you all know him, but maybe, there are some people watching us from YouTube. Mazin Kumsia is an academician at Bethlehem University. He's an activist and advocate for social justice. He's the founder and director of the Palestine Museum of Natural History and has been nominated for 2025 Nobel Peace Prize. I hope he gets it. Now we come to Sami El-Arian. He's there?
Yes, he's ready. Yes.
Okay. He's the son of parents who expelled from Palestine in 1948. He's a passionate activist and targeted by the USA for his activism. He's a professor of computer engineering. Now we are going to listen to Sami El-Arian's testimony. Oh, you are here. I was expecting you to from the screen. Please, let me close this. Come on.
Thank you very much. And thank you for convening this important conference. My argument today deals with the essence of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We do not have a Palestinian problem. What we have is an Israeli problem. And the essence of the Israeli problem is the Zionist movement. The Zionist movement that started over a century and a quarter ago, as Laura Alborno said earlier, is a settler colonial movement that embodies a racist and supremacist ideology, aims to uproot the indigenous people in Palestine and replace them with Jewish communities from around the world. Because of the limitation of time, I'm going to skip the impact of that Zionist movement not only on the Palestinian people, but also on the whole region. the Zionists, in coordination and support of imperialist powers, first the United Kingdom, briefly France, and since at least 1967 the United States, have been able to complete their project and enterprise in colonizing not only the whole of Palestine, but also imposing their hegemony on the whole region. And through lots of political gimmicks, there was a facade that there's somehow a political process by which Palestinians could regain some of their rights. This process culminated in the 1993 fake Oslo Accords. The idea of the Oslo Accords was very simple. Palestinians, in the name of their official representatives, would recognize the Zionist project on 78% of Palestinian territory in exchange for a Palestinian state on 22%. It was a fake process. The number of settlers in September 1993 were about 125,000. Today, the number over 800,000. There was never actually a recognition by any Israeli government, left or right, throughout the process of any kind of Palestinian sovereignty on any part of Palestine. And of course, when the right wing took over, through much of this process, particularly since 2009, what we have is a project of Greater Israel. The Zionist state, the Zionist regime had choices, had options, particularly after 1993. These options were that they had to choose 2 out of 3 things: being majority Jewish, calling themselves democratic, and the whole land of Palestine. If they were choosing being democratic and Jewish, that is the so-called 2-state solution. They rejected that option, and today there is no viable mechanism by which there could be 2-state solution. This fact actually was reiterated by John Kerry in the waning days of Obama in December 2016, in which he says there is no 2-state solution. That train has come and gone. That's left the station. That ship has sailed. The other option would have been democratic, calling themselves democratic, and the whole land of Palestine from the river to the sea. That would be a 1-state solution. That would be the demise of the Zionist regime, the Zionist ideology, and of course, not a single Zionist party would accept that. So that left them with the third choice, which is to be Jewish majority, because half of the population would not be recognized, calling themselves democratic, but only within the Jewish context, and keep the whole land. That ended up with an apartheid regime. That apartheid regime, Israeli style, would not have been sustained. The whole world could look the other way for some time, but over time it's going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to sustain. So they created a 4th option, and that option is genocide and ethnic cleansing. The same process they followed, they implemented, they perfected in 1948. If anybody has any doubts, they can go to much resources now, particularly after the new Israeli historians have exposed much of that archives. What we're seeing today was nothing short of the implementation of taking opportunity in Gaza and in the future in the West Bank, if they are successful in Gaza, to make sure that this demographic problem that they are facing could be resolved through this brutal genocide and ethnic cleansing. Today in Palestine, between the river and the sea, you have 7.3 million Palestinians who have basically no rights, civil or political or otherwise, with 7.1 million Jews. I don't have time to go through the analysis, what that actually means over time, but my central argument here today is that after Tufan al-Aqsa, after the October 7th attacks, after we saw what we had seen, after we saw thousands of people being exterminated brutally, no mercy, man, women, child, elderly, After we see the devastation in Gaza, there should never be a compromise, there should not be a compromise with the Zionist ideology, with the Zionist regime, with the Zionist project. Our central goal should be to dismantle the Zionist structures, the Zionist institutions in Palestine and throughout the world. That's what the world needs, that's what the region needs. The alternative is a complete hegemony of the Israeli regime, of the Zionist ideology, not only in Palestine, but also across the region and beyond. These are the true facts that we are facing today. What Netanyahu represents today is this vision in which Israel could be in control of the whole region, in which the whole region could be actually further fragmented, not as 22 or 23 countries in the aftermath of the Sykes-Picot, but of being 40 or even 50 different fragmentations, whether de facto or de jure. Now, the question is, you are talking about dismantling this powerful state that is empowered by the most powerful country in the world, the United States, given everything it needs, given military equipment, hardware, the most technological ones, funds, unlimited funds, political protection, diplomatic protection, and so on and so forth. You must be dreaming. And I say that's not about being dream. That's not a dream. That's a human project that needs to be confronted with human efforts. Now, to dismantle the Zionist institutions and the Zionist structures, that means we have to understand its sources of strength. Why is it powerful? And if we do the analysis, and whoever is interested, I wrote a chapter in the book that was edited by Ilan Pape and Ramzi Baroud, in which I talk about this in details. You will find that they are sources for this strength. We have to deal with that. And the formula is very simple. The Palestinians are the primary victims, but hardly the only victims. What we see today as the present of the Palestinians could be the future of other people in this region. And therefore, this is not a problem for Palestinians to solve. Again, the formula is very simple. You cannot dismantle without the Palestinians, and you cannot dismantle these racist structures with the Palestinians alone. It's a problem that everyone should be involved in. You're not just a supporter, you must be a partner and parcel of this project to dismantle this menace, this evilness, this brutal structures that want to control the region and beyond. Now, once we identify these sources of strength, we need to deal with them properly. Now, I identified 12 imperatives, 12 sources. I call them pillars. It's like a building. Israel is like a building that is sitting on 12 pillars. Once we identify these 12 pillars and start deal with them properly, and everyone involved, again, not just Palestinians. Palestinians can hardly deal with 3 or 4, which means Palestinians alone cannot dismantle that. We need everybody's effort in every field, politically, diplomatically, commercially, economically, legally, academically, culturally, in arts, entertainment, sports, in every field, human rights, media, and so on and so forth. When everybody is part of that struggle, it's like having a hammer and you're identifying part of which column you're in, and everybody is hammering. After a while, 6, 7, 8 of these pillars would collapse. The whole building collapses, and the world will be better for that. So once we identify these things, identify which part, those people who come together to dismantle this evilness, and in which geography they work on, then we are in a global movement. So the idea is to build this global movement. This is not a problem that will be solved at the end in the military field. Perhaps at one point there could be, because they're going to employ every source of power, including nuking people that they think they are danger to them. We need to be prepared for that as well. And that, by the way, is one of the pillars. That's one of their sources of power. They think because they have access, and they have actually nuclear weapons, that this is the ultimate weapon they could use against anyone, meaning that we need also to deal with this. That's why they went after Saddam, they went after Syria, they went after Iran, they went after everyone. They want to be to monopolize, that they could have that weapon without having to fear that it could be neutralized. So, to summarize, what we need to do is to build this global movement with the aim of dismantling racist, Zionist structures and institutions around the world. And to be a Zionist, it's not just being Jewish. To be a Zionist is to believe in the Zionist project, is to believe or acknowledge or recognize that exclusively Jews have sovereignty over Palestine. If you believe in that, then you're a Zionist. You could be Jewish, could be Christian, could be Muslim, could be Hindu, could be Buddhist, could be non-religious, could be atheist, whatever. So the structures that feed into this Zionist project are beyond this region. They are everywhere. We've seen it in the United States. We've seen the power, how they're able to silence anyone who dares to challenge this project. Palestine today is the only cause that is capable of uniting all those forces around the globe. Give me one cause that can bring all the capitals of the world to demonstrate against what the Zionists are doing in Palestine. I don't think you'll find any. So we need to take advantage of this reality, that Palestine today is the compass, is the scale, is the symbol, is the key towards the emancipation not only of the Palestinians. Actually, if we look at the struggle around the world, you'll find that the Palestinians have been way in advance than other struggles. So we need to support them, but we need to be part of that struggle. So to conclude, I'd say that we have two missions. Our first mission is to support the steadfastness, the resilience, the perseverance of Palestinians to stay on their own land. Without that, there is no struggle. We have to support them to stay there. So that's why what Trump and Netanyahu are trying to do in Gaza is so dangerous. They're trying to move wholesale the people from Palestine. We need to make sure that never happens. Make sure that people in the West Bank and other places, that they stay on their own land. And if the Palestinians only do that, that's enough, that they stay for that struggle to stay on, to continue. But the second mission is where everybody is involved, is to engage, as well as to confront all Zionist structures, all Zionist efforts across the globe in every field. Whatever field you're in, you're going to find Zionist influence, and your mission is to eradicate, to weaken, to lessen, to end that Zionist influence. Over time, this Zionist movement will crack and then will be defeated, will be eradicated, will be dismantled, and only then we'll have victory. Thank you so much.
We thank Sami for this impressive testimony. He made a call for collective action for a better world, and I agree with him. Unfortunately, Nura Erakat is not with us today, right? She will not be. We hope to meet her in Istanbul, I hope. Now, the final testimony will be from Azam Tamimi. He is a British Palestinian Jordanian academician and political activist. He is an expert in the fields of political thought, Islamic movements, and Zionism ideology.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله ومن والاه. I'm grateful for this opportunity, and I would like to thank the organizers for honoring me with the invitation to be with you in this function. I was born 7 years after the Nakba. And the testimonies we heard yesterday, and we've been hearing similar testimonies for the past 20 months, keep reminding me of the bedtime stories that my mother kept telling me and my siblings about how she and her family, entire family, were evicted from Bi'r Saba, where she was born and where she was raised, up to the age of 16, and had to live like hundreds of thousands of other Palestinians. What is happening today in Gaza is happening in a modern technological warfare, but the principle is one and the same. It happened to my mother before, it happened to so many Palestinians in 1948, and since then it continued to happen throughout this occupation. Now, when we talk about global responsibility and what should have been done or shouldn't have been done, what really comes to mind is that the first global sin when it comes to Palestine was recognizing the legitimacy of what Israel did in 1948. Recognizing a Jewish state in my mother's house and on my father's land is the most sinful act perpetrated by the United Nations and the leading powers of the day, and afterwards by quite a few Arab regimes that don't represent their peoples. Because how could anyone recognize the legitimacy of depopulating a land, of removing its indigenous population, of committing heinous crimes like the one perpetrated in Deir Yassin and the hundreds that were perpetrated afterwards and continue to be perpetrated in Gaza today and in much of the West Bank, by the way. Now, why, in my opinion, it has been so sinful to do so? Because as Dr. Sami explained, we are dealing here with an inhumane ideology, an ideology that doesn't recognize the humanity of the other. Because what they did to my mother, to my grandparents, to hundreds of thousands of other Palestinians, and continue today to millions of Palestinians, is simply unacceptable under any norms, under international law, under whatever ethics one may recognize. But in fact, this is exactly what the Europeans did in so many parts of the world before. Same ideology, same attitude, with almost the same result. Michael Pryor talked in detail about this in his great book, The Bible and Colonialism, explaining how the Bible was used in order to justify the La Conquista of the Americas and the eradication of the indigenous population there, and then in New Zealand and Australia, the apartheid regime in South Africa, and then the creation of a Zionist entity in Palestine. When a certain group of people believed that God gave them a license to take other people's lands, to kill them, to do whatever it takes to remove them as an obstacle, how can you deal with such a community? How can you deal with such a mentality? It's impossible. You cannot deal with them because they believe they have a divine license. And just recently, the BBC showed a brilliant documentary about the settler movement in the West Bank. And one of the settlers, a lady I remembered from more than 20 years ago, when I saw her first interview ever, as far as I'm concerned, on the BBC as well, when she was asked, how do you justify coming from Europe and doing this to the Palestinians? And she said, had God not told me to do so, I would have been a criminal. Blaming it on God. What sort of God is this? And that's why, as Dr. Sami explained, Zionism is not just a threat to the Palestinians. Zionism as an ideology is a threat to humanity as a whole. Actually, Zionism has been the reincarnation of Nazism. Israel is a reincarnation of the Third Reich. And the world is beginning to recognize this. The young students in America, in Europe, and elsewhere in the world are now realizing that their parents and their grandparents who supported or sympathized with Zionism for so many years were sinners. They were wrong, because you cannot do this anymore. Even Jewish students are now saying, not in our name. They're realizing that Zionism is the greatest threat to the Jews themselves in what it claims in terms of a divine right to do to the Palestinians what they are doing. The 7th of October has resulted in the destruction of much of Gaza. Yes, true, that is true. But I think, as was written by two American writers on the 7th of October itself, the 7th of October might well result in what the Tet Offensive in Vietnam in 1968 resulted in. And that is the end of Zionism in Palestine, just as the Tet Offensive started the process of ending American imperialism in Vietnam. And that's why I'm truly optimistic. Despite the pain, despite the deep wound in Gaza and elsewhere, I'm truly optimistic. The next generation in America and Europe will be a different generation. The students who are today being suppressed by the Trump administration, who is fighting Harvard and has suppressed Columbia and is trying to do the same thing to other universities, and the various European governments that are trying to suppress people and prevent them from expressing their true feelings toward the Palestinians, the next generation will be different. And the next generation will be like the generation of the late 60s that brought pressure to bear on decision makers in America and in Europe that led to the end of American imperialism in Vietnam. The other thing that is making me optimistic about this is that for a change, an increasing number of people are acknowledging the right of the Palestinians to resist. And not just peacefully. There is no such thing as only peaceful resistance. Resistance is with all forms. Whatever you have, then you can use if you are the victim of foreign invasion. The Palestinians had the right and will continue to have the right to carry weapons and invent means and methods of resisting Zionism. And the world will, step by step, realize that this is a God-given right in which they should be supported rather than condemned. Those who condemn the Palestinian resistance as terroristic are accomplices in the current genocide in Gaza. The Palestinian resistance, including armed resistance, is legitimate resistance. And this is what the new generation of young men and women around the world are recognizing. Soon, tomorrow, the day after, probably I won't be alive when this happens, but Palestine will be free and our people will return to it, inshallah. Thank you very much.
We now turn to our last speaker, Ms. Noura Erakat, a Palestinian-American scholar and professor of African Studies and Criminal Justice at Rutgers University. She will share her thoughts on the current situation from a civil society perspective. Ms. Erakat, you have the floor.
Thank you. Today is day 585 of genocide. And every day we witness unprecedented atrocities. 2 days ago, we saw a baby in a red onesie, not yet 1 year old, have both of her tiny legs amputated. We witnessed a missile rip through a hospital to kill a renowned journalist receiving treatment and learned of the assassination of a 12-year-old boy who witnessed the massacre of 15 paramedics and their burial in a mass grave. Israel has destroyed 92% of Gaza's residential buildings, incapacitated its 36 hospitals, and prevented the entry of food and basic goods. In doing so, it is not only killing Palestinians now, but threatening the possibility of a Palestinian future. A campaign that seeks to obliterate the future of a people is a genocide. Yet, despite these chilling statistics and an ICJ decision indicating its plausibility, there remains controversy as to this basic fact. Why? The most pervasive talking point is that Israel is not targeting Palestinians as a people, but only targeting Hamas. Putting aside significant issues in law and fact that militate against this point, let me just share with you some statistics. What we know so far is that 2% of Palestinians in Gaza have been killed, including over 20,000 children buried and disappeared. The names of those under the age of 1 fill the first 14 pages of a 649-page document. So far, 1,200 entire families have been erased forever from the civil registry. 3 months into the war, the UN humanitarian chief described Gaza as uninhabitable. And since then, the situation has only gotten worse. This certainly exceeds Hamas militants. According to Israel, these horrifying numbers are irrelevant because they are the result, they say, of deliberate human shielding by Hamas. Again, putting aside significant issues of law and fact, let me just share with you the tactics of the army itself. It has sniped children twice above the waist. It has used quadcopters to spray and kill children who are sprawled and injured on the floor. It has destroyed the largest in vitro fertility clinic, including 4,000 embryos. It has executed patients with their hands zip-tied and thrown into mass graves. They have sexually assaulted detainees captured without charge or trial, bombed safe routes where Palestinians were ordered to flee, bombed safe zones where Palestinians were ordered to shelter, tortured medical doctors to death, destroyed more than half of Gaza's desalination plants, undermining access to clean water, leveled all 4 major universities, attacked factories, libraries, bakeries, heritage sites, 247 mosques, 3 churches, and bulldozed 16 cemeteries. As put by Professor Shireen Sayali, any honest observer of this war understands that the target of Israeli force and US-supplied weapons is the Palestinian civilian. Hamas is the collateral damage. The purpose of this campaign is the destruction of the Palestinian people for the sake of achieving long-term Israeli security, what I term Nakba peace, a violent oxymoron that predicates Jewish Israeli safety on the elimination of Palestinians. In pursuit of its territorial ambitions to achieve unchecked Zionist settler sovereignty, Israel has removed Palestinians for 77 years and counting. It has imposed a permanent military occupation on the West Bank and Gaza for 58 years and counting. And it has besieged 2.3 million Palestinians, who are now possibly only 2 million because of this past 19 months, besiege them for 17 years and counting. What we have been witnessing for the past 585 days is the cruelest and most violent episode of the ongoing Nakba. This did not start on October 7th, nor was it a response to October 7th that provided a useful cover in order to accelerate this massive removal. On October 12, 2023, Agricultural Minister Avi Dichter told us plainly, this is Nakba 2023. a campaign that is evidenced across Palestinian geographies, including in the northern West Bank, where some 40,000 Palestinians have been removed just this year. The Trump administration has adopted this goal in its current bid to build a Gaza Riviera to remove Palestinians to the Sudan, Somalia, or Syria. And most recently, on May 4th, 2025, the Israeli cabinet unanimously voted to reoccupy all of Gaza and ethnically cleanse its remaining inhabitants. This is why the return of more than 300,000 Palestinians to their homes in North Gaza in early 2025 was so incredible. It was the first time in nearly 8 decades of ongoing Nakba that we witnessed the return of Palestinians en masse, a return that embodies the national aspirations of the Palestinian people. As chronicled by Ahmed Abu Rtima, who marched home, on that day, I walked as I had never walked before, about 15 kilometers nonstop. I entered Gaza City, a dream long cherished during the days of war, now realized. Despite unprecedented cruelty, Palestinians refused to surrender and marched home by foot. This is precisely why Palestinians are racialized as a security threat, because we refuse to disappear. The Nakba is ongoing, and so is Palestinian resistance to our elimination. There is sufficient law to end the genocide, to lift the blockade, to end the occupation, and to realize Palestinian self-determination. Had international law ever been enough, however, Palestinian refugees would be growing their families and their gardens on their original lands rather than searching for the remains of flesh of their babies beneath the rubble. Remarkably, the time of genocide has also been a moment of significant judicial strides furthering Palestinian liberation. In January 2024, the International Court of Justice determined that Israel's campaign was plausible genocide. In May 2024, it issued an other provisional measure ordering the withdrawal from Rafah. That same month, the International Criminal Court finally issued arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. In July 2024, the ICJ issued an advisory opinion determining that Israel's presence in the West Bank and Gaza is unlawful, ordering it to withdraw its settlers and military from the territory and to provide reparations for the Palestinian people. Last month, the ICJ heard an argument on the legality of banning UNRWA, the UN refugee agency responsible for humanitarian relief, and now banned amid a starvation campaign that has killed 57 children in 2 months. This is not a legal controversy. It is a political one. The United States, among other states, has wrung its hands behind judicial rulings, but this is selective deference to the court. In its last days of office, the Biden administration recognized there's a genocide of the Masalit ethnic tribe in Darfur by the Rapid Support Forces. When asked whether they can use the same standards to make that decision to adjudicate Israel's campaign in Gaza, the U.S. ambassador at large for global criminal justice said, quote, "It will ultimately be for the ICJ judges to decide," with zero irony, that they did not have to submit their evidence on the Sudan before the ICJ. This is not a legal controversy. This is a political one. The selective deference to the ICJ on the question of genocide of Palestinians is an attempt to deflect responsibility, and the ongoing counter-revolution against activists globally is an attempt to revise a history of the present. Since 2020, an emerging consensus among legacy human rights organizations and the World Court have defined Israel as an apartheid regime. Rather than boycott, divest from, and sanction apartheid Israel, the global community has attempted to normalize it. 5 years later, we see the danger of allowing that exception. Apartheid and genocide are on the same continuum. The three of the specific acts conducted to maintain apartheid are identical to the acts committed to commit genocide. In the former, for apartheid, they are done for the purpose of domination. In the latter, they are done with the intent to destroy. Genocide is the logical outcome of any project to conquer and settle the land upon which and other people live, unless it is checked. Many of you here, many of you, have either survived colonialism or are the ancestors of those who have survived colonialism, and you are painfully aware of its legacies. That's why in 1974, this body firmly resolved that Palestinians are a juridical people. Palestinians exist and deserve to exist by relegating Palestine to a bilateral political issue beyond the reach of international norms. You have steadily normalized occupation. By failing to apply sanctions and engage in boycott, many of you have normalized apartheid. And now, by failing to act, you are at risk of normalizing genocide. But if you normalize genocide, you will have nothing left. If it is permissible to deny a people exist, to cage them, to subject them to systematic warfare, then to use AI technology to bomb them at unprecedented rates in their homes, to burn them alive in tents, to experiment on them with suicide drones, to deny them medical care, to allow premature babies to rot in NICU units, and mamas be denied anesthetic to have C-sections, to starve them while their food decays in miles of aid trucks, all without consequence, and worse, while insisting that their lives are secondary, if not altogether insignificant, relative to Zionist settler sovereignty, then I promise you that no one is safe. As put by Colombian President Gustavo Petro, Gaza is a rehearsal for the rest of the world. Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich recently said that the victory in the war would mean the full destruction of Gaza and the displacement of its residents. He has also boasted that Israelis, quote, are finally going to conquer the Gaza Strip. We are no longer afraid of the word occupation. Smotrich's audacity is our failure. You must make it impossible for Smotrich and anyone else to boast of conquest through genocide in the 21st century. Make those who speak it have to say it in hushed whispers, in closed rooms, rather than boast about that conquest. But let us speak honestly. Most of you fear U.S. retribution. The genocide in Gaza is one of the major atrocities of our time, and most people in the world are against it. Our inability to stop it reflects an international system where the equality of nation-states remains an aspirational principle. It might be good for us to remember, the United States is an empire, but the United States is not the world. In this precise moment, U.S. lawmakers welcomed the international war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu into the White House. U.S. lawmakers and universities welcome Minister of National Security Itamar Ben-Gvir, who was disqualified from military service because of his affiliation with the Kahan movement, declared a terrorist organization by the U.S. and Israel. Can you imagine being so extreme that you cannot serve in the Israeli army? The same army that sprays 5.5-year-old girls with 335 bullets and executes 15 paramedics and buries them along with their ambulances in a mass grave? The Israeli army wouldn't have Ben-Gvir, but U.S. lawmakers and several U.S. universities embraced him, just as they colluded to kidnap, disappear, and deport students. Do not look west for moral or political leadership. The United States has long absconded on that position. Do not let the United States and Israel upend the global system. In its defense of Israel, the United States threatens the entire legal structure established since the Second World War. In just 19 months, the U.S. has vetoed 5 ceasefire resolutions to end this genocide, despite the extraordinary invocation of Article 99 by the UN Secretary General and 2 invocations of Uniting for Peace resolutions. Both the Biden and Trump administration have denigrated the ICJ. U.S. National Security spokesman John Kirby described the ICJ case on the Genocide Convention as, quote, meritless, counterproductive, and completely without any basis in fact whatsoever. Our world court is being denigrated. The primary judicial organ of this body is being denigrated by those who claim global leadership. The U.S. is not even a signatory to the Rome Statute, which established the International Criminal Court, but the Trump administration has passed an executive order to place sanctions on the prosecutor and anyone who cooperates with the court. In October 2024, 107 members of Congress threatened to cease financial support to the UN if it unseated Israel, literally threatening its budget for doing your job. What is the purpose of the UN if it cannot stop a genocide and prevent the calculated starvation of 2 million people? The international community has failed many times before and at great cost. One of the most significant times was in 1936, when the League of Nations allowed Mussolini's fascist Italy to invade Ethiopia, an independent member state of the League. Then, the League imposed cosmetic sanctions rather than an oil embargo to stop the war. It tolerated Italy's use, of chemical weapons and described Ethiopia's people's war as human shielding. The consequence of racist imperialism was ultimately the dissolution of the League of Nations. The UN was born of this failure. It was born of the commitment to not let atrocities of genocide, from Namibia to the Armenian genocide to the Holocaust, happen again. It is that commitment that is at stake today. If you do not stand up and speak out, this very system will be a casualty of the U.S.-Israel genocidal war on Palestine and the Palestinian people. Today, we do not need the United Nations to be a powerful symbol of international cooperation. We need your collective action to simply be powerful. In this moment, we have many choices. We can acknowledge Israel's campaign as genocide and impose an arms embargo, block the ports, sever diplomatic ties, sever all civilian and military trade, impose cultural and academic boycotts, and unseat Israel for its obstinate transgressions. If genocide is too much, you can confront this atrocity as a war. Specifically, a colonial war against a racist regime and alien occupation, regulated with the additional protocols and customary laws of war that recognize the captives as POWs, ensure them humane treatment, recognize Palestinian militants as combatants, permit third-party intervention. We can use the law to protect hospitals and schools and shelters, to protect the journalists and doctors and aid workers, to forcibly open the humanitarian corridors and abide by the ICC arrest warrants to arrest Netanyahu and Gallant upon arrival. If war is too much, you can confront this atrocity as a humanitarian tragedy, and you can send in a peacekeeping mission to protect Palestinians who have been denied the right to self-defense for nearly 8 decades. And if humanitarian tragedy is too much, you can find a way to have mercy on the Palestinian children, the ones who have been pulled from the rubble with 2 limbs and no family, and find themselves in a cage without food or water. Do not sit in the seat of power and do nothing. The United States is an empire, but the United States is not the world. You are the world. Each and every one of you has the capacity to halt this charade, to fulfill the minimal mandate of protecting a people's right to exist. Individually, you are each someone's ancestor, and you will be an ancestor to someone. Our time on this earth is ephemeral, and I implore you to give it meaning. As the Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish reminds us, we are not the most chosen people in the world, but no one is more chosen than us. You cannot abandon Palestine without betraying your legacy, your progeny, and yourself. May we transform this world into a place worthy of our children. May you be protected, may you be strong, may we be victorious. Free Palestine, and may Palestine free us all. Thank you.
We thank Ms. Erakat for sharing her very clear, powerful, and extremely compelling critical insights on the plight of the Palestinian people. Thank you.